Hometowns, baby. Let's do it. It starts out, of course, with an interview of Gary talking about how important family is to him and all of that. But more importantly, he agrees with me. Let me explain. He thinks hometowns at this age looks much different than it does with someone in their 20s or 30s. Yes, of course. So he's meeting with children and grandchildren and seeing how he fits in with them as opposed to parents. And he hasn't had to meet the fam, since 1968. When he met his wife's family. Now, the key takeaway here is he says he only wants to say I love you to one more person in his lifetime. There are a few issues with this. First, hopefully he outlives his partner, because if there's enough time, you might have to find someone else. And second, this may be foreshadowing. Not that that's a problem, but here's what I think. I think they're trying to get us all stirred up because he's probably going to say it to more than one of them. But stay tuned and keep in mind, that was a post-production interview. Production, where they get all the juicy info that they need to tell the story they want to tell. Okay, so first hometown is in Shrewsbury, New Jersey, where we are meeting Teresa and her family. She runs up to hug him, but at this age, his age, their age, there's no jumping into his arms like we're used to seeing. Full of excitement, but physically downgraded. Now, she mentions how she hasn't introduced a man to her family since her husband passed away. And it just got me thinking, we hear this a lot on the show, that it's been however many years since they brought someone home. How their family's going to be so shocked and this must be someone really special. But pretty sure that they know that that's part of the deal. Right? You don't just lock yourself away in LA for 6 weeks and then come home with some surprise man that nobody knew you were dating. Anyway, also, I noticed that Golden Bachelor didn't do any traveling like Young Bachelor does. They're in the mansion for 3 weeks and they're like, oh, surprise, we're going to Croatia. Golden Bachelor just stayed at the mansion. Yes, there were time constraints, but I really think that this just adds to the wholesomeness of this show. No one needs to take extravagant vacations before heading home to be an influencer. But back to Teresa. So we walk into a very lively bunch, very warm and inviting. We've got Teresa's daughter, son-in-law, 3 grandsons, and her 2 sisters. She starts by telling them all her birthday suit limo exit story, which I totally forgot was her. If you were to have asked me who did that, I would have guessed April. Everyone here seems to really like Gary. They say he's warm and genuine, and her daughter thinks they have good energy together. But Teresa reminds them that this is kind of a competition and there are 2 other women. And that she's 70 and they're 60. Thank you. The sisters tell her that age doesn't make any difference, but come on. If Gary's trying to say I love you to only one more person, he's got to rob a cradle just for insurance. And the 60-year-olds, they're hotter. They're 10 years younger. They're a little bit hotter. They're a little bit tighter. How would you want to exit this earth? That was really shallow of me to say. I'm not saying those are my feelings and thoughts, but I imagine that they might be other people's. Side note, Starbucks, way too expensive, but their gingerbread chai latte. Okay, so now Gary goes and he talks to the grandsons alone, and they're pretty social with him. They tell him their Nana comes over a lot because she's lonely, kind of making it seem like she might come over a little too much. They're trying to get her out of the house. Then they're making fun of her for the way she takes selfies, that she makes the duck lip face. And they all in unison just mock her. They're very cute and very funny. I want to be friends with these kids. And one of their last conversations is Gary talking to Teresa's daughter. Her questions aren't super tough, like we sometimes see at hometowns. I think the first question was like, what do you like about my mom? And basically he says that he likes the way she looks at him. And a few other things, like the way she leans in. I would say not Gary's best answer. Maybe it was the honest one, but it felt a little bit like the daughter had to fill in some blanks. Oh yeah, she's a really nice woman. And then, Gary agreed. Then she asks him what life would look like after all of this. And he responds that if it's right with someone, you just find a way to make it work. You figure it out. And I believe that too. I like that answer, Gary. So the toughest question here is whether or not he's falling in love with Teresa. And he couldn't say yes or no. Obviously, he wouldn't say no because I think that would probably end things right there. But I give a lot of credit to Gary because he's very honest. He said that the last time he knew what that feeling was back in 1968 when he met Tony. So he knows he has a strong connection with Teresa, but he doesn't know if it's synonymous with being in love. And that's really kind of sad. I kind of would bet, and maybe this is just the case in these situations, that he'll never really be able to replicate the love that he had. Obviously, there's so much rich history in there, but it's a little bit sad to know that you'll just never quite reach that again. It's like a blessing and a curse. Maybe I'm just gonna stop talking about that. Hopefully he gets as close as he can. Okay. Also, maybe he's good at being honest because he's just that kind of guy. We know that he's a very, very good guy. But also, maybe the kids are a little less intimidating than parents. And our last and final conversation is between Gary and her two sisters, and they are just convinced that this is going to work out between them. Teresa's found her guy, they say, and Gary gets emotional, of course. But overall, it really was a heartwarming visit. Her daughter really loved him. In her interview, she was in tears, talking about how he'll never replace the love that they have for their dad, but that this could be like a new thing and that it's not weird for her. And the kids tell him that he should be their new papa. It was all really cute. Probably also because they had this inspirational music in the background. And then they all said their goodbyes, and then off they go to a Ferris wheel, which this part, I feel like I missed the segue. It kind of looked like we were back at the carnival from last week, but either way, they're sitting together in a Ferris wheel, and Teresa tells him she's in love with him, and he says, "That makes me feel so special." But behind the scenes, he says he's fallen in love with her as well. This is where things get real tricky. Listen close. Just kidding. But listen, we don't ever see those words come from his lips. For all we know, it's artificial intelligence. And a couple minutes later, he says, "I love her." But it once again does not come from his lips. At least we don't see it on screen. We don't see him say it. Truthfully, it was like, "I love her," sounded like kind of manufactured. Just not totally human. Okay? What's probably more likely is that they made him say this stuff in post-production interview. Okay, and he was lying, so didn't come out in a nice clean line. Not that he couldn't be in love with her. I just don't think it's authentic, and I think Bachelor production company wants whatever they can to make a nice, dramatic, interesting story happen here. They might have even made him record it at home. Just say, "I love her." Oh, and I'm surprised this is my first time mentioning this, but is Teresa's lipstick always like a little smudged? Can't tell if it's just the shape of her lips maybe, or if the lipstick is in fact in places that it should not be. But that's it. And next up we are in Faith's hometown. I think she's in Benson City, Washington. In my opinion, Faith coming after Teresa is big time. You guys know how I feel about her. I think she's going to be the one. And Gary just acts different around her. So unless the family interaction is a total bust, I think Gary's going to end up using this as an opportunity to properly weigh his feelings. In other words, it's going to be easy for him to see that he likes someone more than he likes Teresa. That sounds mean, but this is The Bachelor. But Faith comes out, she runs up to Gary, and she gives a little hop, a little baby jump into his arms, but no wrapped legs. Probably for the best. And she introduces him to her horses. I think these horses made him a little bit nervous, but he hit it pretty well. She was riding around, and he pretty much was just watching. It was nice, though. She handled her horses well, and this is definitely farm country. This would be farm life for Gary, and Faith is talking about how she's a little bit worried that he's not going to be on board with that kind of lifestyle. But he does get on a horse. He doesn't know what he's doing at first. That is true. But Faith helps him along, gives him some tips, and he is cruising, and they're having a good time. Then they sit and they talk, and Gary mentions how he's very comfortable with this lifestyle, and that really the only challenge for them is going to be figuring out how to spend time together. And then he says, are you listening? If this continues to go where he thinks it's going, he's not going to want to be without her. If that doesn't just close the book, I don't know what will. Actually, I do. Something so drastic like living far apart, because Faith says she wants to be close to her sons. So this could get into Gary's head, I think. If things go well over at Leslie's date, maybe he'll be like, Leslie wants to move close to me, and Faith, I don't know. Something could happen. But Gary tells her, yeah, that's tough, but, and he does this motion. This is so good. But now it's family time. So this could be the key that makes it or breaks it, as Faith says herself. So they walk down the stairs. The family's down there. The family freaks out in a good way. They, again, have really good energy. Lots of smiles. We see her two sons, her sister, a friend, I think, and I don't remember who else. I think there were grandkids. Grandkids were there. So Gary starts it off by talking about how Faith came in on a motorcycle. She did her, her hair flip thing, how she got the first impression rose, and the way she looks at him. Gary is just all about the looks. He's very visceral. First talk we see is Faith and her sister. Her sister is getting very emotional because she says Faith looks like she feels safe. And then it's Gary and her two sons. They seem like very friendly, outgoing, put together men with the exception of the one brother who had his shirt buttoned up all the way to the top. But they ask him if he's in love, and he says, yeah, I kind of think I am. Did he say that with Teresa? No. No, he didn't. At this point in the show, here's how my mind's working. They do this post-production love thing with Teresa because they can't have him be in love with Faith and then that's it. Why would anybody bother to watch the rest of the season? It's like Claire and Dale, except that was a little bit more of a dumpster fire. Then her sister's talking with him and asks if Faith's heart is safe with him, and he pretty much reassures her that it is. And they're both crying. Gary must drink a lot of water. Then we see Gary playing football with the grandkids like a good grandfather would do. Now the show is just laying it on so thick that I'm starting to feel like something just must be amiss. It's too easy. The sister tells him to just go ahead and skip the next hometown since he's in love and he's going to pick her. Faith is like, did she just say that out loud? And Gary nods and looks longingly into her eyes. It's like a Hallmark movie. Oh, but wait. There's more. Then he tells her he loves her, and she says it back. I love you too. And they start straight macking in front of the entire family, grandkids included. And we get shots of all of their faces. It's so heartwarming. The only thing missing to make this a Hallmark movie is like a bunch of cheers and claps. So now we hear Gary's thoughts on all of this, and the only doubtful things that come out of his mouth are in the post-production interview. All those things he says are meaningless. If you want my 2 cents, maybe you do, because here you are watching. Thank you for supporting my channel. Then they kiss for a long time and say goodbye. And Faith seems very giddy. He does too, but she really does. Even mentions how since they told each other they loved each other, that now they're a thing, which was cute for a 60-year-old to say. I'm surprised she didn't say that they're going steady. But then reality kind of sets in that he is leaving her to go to another woman. And then her giddiness turns to tears because she's realizing that it might not turn out the way that she hopes it will. But I would bet it does, Faith. I would bet it does. Now all that's left is, of course, Leslie, who lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Isn't it nice to not have a bunch of girls who are from small town USA strategically end up moving to Los Angeles once the show premieres? Get this though, Leslie runs up and wraps her legs around Gary. I didn't think this was possible. Must be all that pickleball. She didn't have her legs wrapped around him for too long, but it was enough. He made it happen. So we find out we are meeting Leslie's 3 grandkids, 3 children, and a brother. And the brother is significant because he kind of took over as the father figure when her father passed away at 16, when she was 16. So this is kind of the one parent that Gary will be meeting. Now, when the 2 of them walk in to meet the family, it's a much quieter greeting than the other ones. Not that they're unfriendly, they're just a little bit more subdued. Probably not Italian. Maybe they're British. They sit down, and talk, but we really don't see much before they jump right into the private conversations. And first is Leslie and her daughter. And her daughter is just basically crying the entire time. I think it's just that she's worried about her mom getting hurt again, because as we have found out, she's been hurt many times, cheated on, all of that. It's horrible. I feel really bad for Leslie because I just have a gut feeling that she's going to get hurt. And then this is just going to be awful for all of them. I hate when this happens. And then her daughter says that she thinks they're each other's missing link. It's just, I hate it. Everybody gets their hopes up. So then we go to Gary versus the grandkids, and it's another wholesome moment. They're grilling him a little bit and say, is it true that you and my grandma are a couple? Then we have a quick clip of her and her sons saying that they're a good couple. All of these conversations are so much shorter than the other 2 hometowns. They're like speeding through. But I think maybe they had to save some time, which really is only about 2 minutes, for the conversation between Gary and her brother, Stuart. Stuart comes out and says that it's strange to be talking to someone who's dating his sister, but is also dating 2 other women. Yes, Stuart, this show is very strange. Your sanity does not go unnoticed. But it also kind of seems like Gary is the type of person that he wants Leslie to be with, and then even gives him his blessing. But he's not all in by any means. You can just tell. I think that they're all mostly just guarded, but hopeful. No one in the family seemed like super jazzed about it. But the 2 of them go ahead, say bye to the family, end up in some alleyway, and then Leslie tells him she loves him. And woe is me. my friends, okay? Because Gary says it too. Yeah, he tells her he loves her. This was not in post-production. He says he was told never to pass up on an opportunity to tell someone you love them. And so he kind of emotionally says he loves her. However, maybe this is his somewhat unconventional way of trying not to hurt her. Maybe. Guys, I don't know. I gotta find some way to rationalize this whole thing if I'm sticking with him picking Faith. Plus, I might be right. I think he is overwhelmed with emotion. He does feel for her and is maybe consumed with the desire to protect her heart. To guard and protect her heart. Anybody get that reference? Okay. Well, anyway, looks like Teresa's going home. So now it's time for the rose ceremony, and Gary, of course, doesn't know what he's going to do because he's in love with 3 women. Not true. You were only in love with Teresa in post-production. Yeah, so I've mentioned post-production a lot of times. It's kind of important. So just bear with me. Now, all the women, as they exit the limo, are a little nervous. You can tell, but they're all also showing a little cleavage. Classic tactic, if he's on the fence, might as well show a little cleave. They're all lined up and ready for their fate. And out walks Gary very slowly. And they pan over to a golden rose. This is my first time seeing this. Maybe I was just blind to it in every other episode. But is this new? It's basically like someone took the Beauty and the Beast rose and dipped it in liquid gold and even put it right back in its glass case. So is this the final rose? Are we being that literal with the golden thing? Guess we are. Okay. But anyway, Gary gives a nice speech like he always does. Talks about the difficulties when families start getting involved, how he's got to stick to this journey and find his true love. So he picks up the first rose and with clear tension in his face, kind of like he has to poop, the first rose goes to Leslie. So that leaves Teresa and Faith, obviously. And Teresa's face is exactly what you would expect for someone who realizes that it's over. It's over for them. Well, this is great. Go ahead, just go give it to Faith. I think she probably thought that it was between her and Leslie in the bottom 2, but with tears in his eyes, Gary grabs the last rose and gives it to nobody, but only because he needs a break. So he puts the rose down, he walks outside, he curses, keels over, tries not to throw up, curses again, and then they leave us hanging. There had to be one of these episodes in here at some point. They always do it. But next week, we will find out who he chooses, and there will be a women tell all. Part of the previews shows Sandra referring to all the other contestants as her sister wives. And I think I coined that, but I'm willing to share. And at some point, Gary is going to come out and confront the person that he sent home, and he's crying over it. But at this point, is that something that I need to mention? Can we all just assume that he's going to cry? And our final little end clip is Leslie's grandkids asking him how old he is, how many girls he's kissed. Just a good old-fashioned grill session. They were definitely prepped ahead of time for that. Very cute, though. And that's it. Week 6. Hometown week is over. All that's left after this, and the women tell all, is fantasy suites. If they have them. Will there be fantasy suites? Will there be performance assistants? Will he opt out of it? Will it just be a sleepover? Will he be using a CPAP? So many unanswered questions. Let's find out next week on The Golden Bachelor.